If I had to describe Ori and the Will-o'-the-Wisps in one word, it would be beautiful. In fact, to be honest, if I could only ever describe one game series as beautiful, it would be the Ori series. Honestly, the music and the visuals are just so stunningly beautiful throughout the epic adventure. It really is a treat on the senses. Ori and the Will-o'-the-Wisps is in many ways a carbon copy of its predecessor, Ori and the Blind Forest. The similarities are honestly extremely numerous. The visuals and sound design are the same, the character is the same, a lot of the enemies are the same, but also the premise of the game is the same, with a corrupted forest with areas that need to be cleansed. And even the main antagonist is almost exactly the same, an evil bird with glowing eyes. These similarities are so numerous, it does start to feel like a DLC rather than a brand new game. But let me go into some of the things that are significantly different from the previous game. Notably, the save mechanic is different, as you're no longer expected to save manually using your character's power. Instead, Will-o'-the-Wisps opts for a much more standard autosave function. The newer game has weapons and upgrades you can buy, and essentially a bank of runes you can find and have a certain number active at a time. Essentially, there's more character customization in Ori and the Will-o'-the-Wisps. You would think this might be a good thing, but honestly, I feel like an introduction of money encourages grinding, and the introduction of runes adds a level of complexity the game simply is better without. It wasn't broken, it didn't need to be fixed. Another way Will-o'-the-Wisps is different is the introduction of bosses. Again, I feel this is an addition that Ori didn't need, and adds a difficulty and frustration that the series can honestly do without. They are frankly too hard, too long, and too punishing, and at odds with the challenging but relatively unpunishing rest of the game. Someone might draw a parallel between boss battles and escape sequences, but the escape sequences are superior in every way. The escape sequences are all balanced, and are all possible when you reach them, and therefore feel fair. They are much more visually striking than boss battles, and are not overlong, and therefore far less frustrating. I do have to just add, though, I do think that when I went back and beat them, they're very satisfying to beat. I also truly object to the fact that it makes sense to explore the world and then kill the bosses at the end. It ruins the pacing of the game and makes it feel like no progress is being made mid-game, and then suddenly everything is moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour. I believe this can be blamed in large part on the open world. Blind Forest had more of a Metroidvania vibe, with areas that can't be explored without certain upgrades. Will-o'-the-Wisp starts this way, but then opens up into an open world that allows you to go in any direction towards any objective. The problem is that sometimes the limiting factor is the power of your character, and it is rarely clear to me whether I'm finding a challenge difficult because I need to improve my character, or whether I just need to get good. This again adds to the frustration of the game. Another way Will-o'-the-Wisps is different is the introduction of weapons. While it's nice to have different ways to attack enemies, I did find myself having to switch items more times than I felt reasonable, and crucially, I don't believe it's an improvement on the simple combat of Blind Forest. Ultimately, I think I felt disappointed with Will-o'-the-Wisps because it simultaneously felt too similar to Blind Forest and too different. I know that sounds stupid, but on reflection, I believe it's because it doesn't feel like they have either built on the strengths of the previous title or ironed out the weaknesses. In fact, I'd say they've doubled down on the weaknesses and removed some of the strengths. The power of the story of Wisps is watered down by being almost play-by-play a rehash of Forest, while not improving on the relatively confusing narrative that I complained about in my Blind Forest review. The previously simple and fun combat has been replaced by a more complex system that requires a higher level of skill to grasp. The excellent escape sequences have been all but replaced by frustrating boss battles, and the change on how upgrades work often feels like a chore, all while other aspects that maybe should have been changed remain the same. So would I recommend Will-o'-the-Wisps? On balance, no. Not unless you have already played Blind Forest and loved the story and visuals so much, you kind of want to play it again, but with different mechanics and a new map. Although I enjoyed my playthrough on stream, it absolutely feels like a step in the wrong direction for the Ori games.